Okay, this is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I'm just going to continue reading this section on Plotinus, entitled The Three Fundamental Principles of Plotinus's Metaphysics. The three basic principles of Plotinus's metaphysics are called by him the One, or equivalently the Good, Intellect, and Soul. These principles are both ultimate ontological realities and explanatory principles. Plotinus believed that if they were recognized by Plato as such, that they were recognized by Plato as such, as well as by the entire subsequent Platonic tradition. The One is the absolutely simple first principle of all. It is both self-caused and the cause of all of being for everything else in the universe. There are, according to Plotinus, various ways of showing the necessity of positing such a principle. They are all rooted in pre-Socratic philosophical scientific tradition. A central axiom of the tradition was the connecting of explanation with reductionism, or the derivation of the complex from the simple. That is, ultimate explanations of phenomena and of contingent entities can only rest in what itself requires no explanation. If what is actually sought is the explanation for something that is in one way or another complex, what grounds the explanation will be simple relative to the observed complexity. Thus, what grounds an explanation must be different from the sorts of things explained by it. According to this line of reasoning, explanantia that are themselves complex, perhaps in some way different from the sort of complexity of the explanand, will be in need of other types of explanation. In addition, a plethora of explanatory principles will themselves be in need of explanation. Taken to its logical conclusion, the explanatory path must finally lead to that which is unique and absolutely uncomplex. The One is such a principle. Plotinus found it in Plato's Republic, where it is named the idea of the good, and in his Parmenides, where it is the subject of a series of deductions. The One, or the good, owing to its simplicity, is indescribable directly. We can only grasp it indirectly by deducing what it is not. Even the names One and Good are faute de mieux. Therefore, it is wrong to see the One as a principle of oneness or goodness, in the sense in which these are intelligible attributes. The name One is least inappropriate because it best suggests absolute simplicity. If the One is absolutely simple, how can it be the cause of the being of anything else, much less the cause of everything? The One is a cause in the sense that it is virtually everything else. This means that it stands in everything else as, for example, white light stands to the colors of the rainbow, or the way in which a properly functioning calculator might be said to contain all the answers to the questions that it can be legitimately put to it. Similarly, an omniscient, simple deity may be said to know virtually all that is knowable. In general, if A is virtually B, then A is both simpler in its existence than B and able to produce B. The causality of the One was frequently explained in antiquity as an answer to the question, how do we derive a many from the One? Although the answer provided by Plotinus and by other Neoplatonists is sometimes expressed in the language of emanation, it is very easy to mistake this for what it is not. It is not intended to indicate either a temporal process or the unpacking or separating of a potentially complex unity. Rather, the derivation was understood in terms of atemporal ontological dependence. The first derivation from the One is intellect. Intellect is the locus of the full array of Platonic forms, those eternal and immutable entities that account for or explain the possibility of intelligible predication. Plotinus assumes that without such forms, there will be no non-arbitrary justification for saying that anything had one property rather than another. Whatever properties things have, they have owing to their being forms, whose instances those properties are. But that still leaves us with the very good question of why an eternal and immutable intellect is necessarily postulated along with these forms. The historical answer to this question is in part that Plotinus assumed that he was following Plato, who in Timaeus claimed that the form of intelligible animal was eternally contemplated by an intellect called the demiurge. This contemplation Plotinus interpreted as cognitive identity, since if the demiurge were contemplating something outside of itself, what would be inside of itself would only be an image or representation of eternal reality, and so it would not actually know what it contemplates, as that is in itself cognitive identity, or as that is in itself. Cognitive identity, then, means that when intellect is thinking, it is thinking itself. Further, Plotinus believed that Aristotle in Book 12 of his Metaphysics and in Book 3 of his De Anima supported both the eternality of intellect, which Aristotle represented as the unmoved mover, and the idea that cognitive identity characterized its operation. Philosophically, Plotinus argued that postulating forms without a superordinate principle, the one, which is virtually what all the forms are, would leave the forms in eternal disunity. If this were the case, then there could be no necessary truth, for all necessary truths, e.g. 3 plus 5 equals 8, express a virtual identity, as indicated here by the equal sign. Consider the analogy of three-dimensionality and solidity. Why are these necessarily connected in a body such as there could not be a body that had one without the other? The answer is that body is virtually three-dimensionality and virtually solidity. Both three-dimensionality and solidity express in different ways what a body is. The role of intellect is to account for the real distinctness of the plethora of forms.